What if the most ordinary aspects of human life were terrifying to the rest of the galaxy? When the Galactic Council sent a team of scientists to Earth, they expected to see an unpredictable, hostile environment. After all, the planet was labeled a death world in their files. But what they didn't expect was for humans to be so comfortable in their surroundings. From scaling icy cliffs with no protective gear to diving into deep waters teeming with predators, Earthlings seemed almost oblivious to the dangers that had alarmed the Council. Our story begins with Chief Researcher Coral, who believes she has seen it all across the cosmos. But the moment she steps onto Earth's soil, she's confronted with the reckless behaviors of these so-called deathworlders. A group of humans strolls past her, unfazed by a downpour of acidic rainwater, a drizzle as they call it, and then proceeds to dive into waters so cold that Coral's own protective gear sends her alarms into overdrive. To her astonishment, one of the humans laughs, splashing water on her gear as they shout, "This is nothing compared to a polar plunge." So what happens when an alien scientist, trained in the most advanced safety protocols, meets a species that treats extreme temperatures, rough terrain, and even dangerous creatures like a walk in the park? As Coral soon discovers, on Earth, surviving the impossible is just another day in the life of a human. Chief Researcher Coral had prepared for Earth like she would for any high-risk, volatile mission. The Galactic Council had provided extensive files on the so-called Death World, a world that scientists across the galaxy deemed nearly uninhabitable. Earth was filled with predators at every corner, extreme weather systems, volatile tectonic activity, and environmental hazards that no rational species would endure. Yet here, despite all predictions, intelligent life thrived. Coral reviewed her data pads as she and her research team prepared for descent. The files displayed dense green jungles where poisonous reptiles and insects prowled, frigid Arctic regions where temperatures dropped low enough to freeze some species in mere minutes, and deserts so hot that the Council deemed them uninhabitable zones. Her suit's automated warning systems lit up continuously as it scanned Earth's atmosphere, detecting high oxygen levels, which, while necessary for human life, could ignite with even the slightest spark. The descent shuttle began to tremble as it hit Earth's atmosphere. Coral braced herself, noting the disconcerting rumbling beneath her feet. But the human pilot who had accompanied her seemed utterly unfazed, whistling a tune and adjusting the ship's controls with what seemed like minimal focus. Coral's colleagues clutched their seats as the turbulence intensified, their own monitors lighting up with warning alerts. "Is everything operating within safety protocols?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of worry. The pilot laughed, his calm demeanor only adding to her discomfort. "Safety protocols? Oh, don't worry. This is normal Earth turbulence," he replied with a casual shrug. "Nothing to get worked up about." Coral exchanged a glance with her assistant, who looked just as uneasy. "This is considered normal?" she whispered in disbelief. Her data suggested this level of atmospheric disturbance would be highly dangerous on most planets, but the pilot simply chuckled again. "Yep, just another bumpy ride. You'd think you were on the roller coasters we got down there." He pointed through the window as the ground rapidly approached. Coral scanned her translator for roller coaster and felt an uneasy twist in her gut. Humans built vehicles that simulated danger? They willingly subjected themselves to such experiences? As they landed, Coral took a deep breath, her suit's filtration system kicking in to protect her from the various microbes and atmospheric elements that would be toxic to most galactic species. Yet here were the humans, laughing and joking, their bodies entirely unprotected in the open air. Once on the ground, Coral and her team were greeted by a local Earth scientist, Dr. Elena Vasquez, who, despite the humid heat and biting insects, wore only lightweight clothing and a wide smile. The aliens in their climate-controlled suits couldn't fathom it. Dr. Vasquez motioned them forward, guiding them across a dense forest trail where the humidity levels spiked, setting off alarms on Coral's suit. "You're quite comfortable in this environment?" Coral asked, her curiosity overshadowing her caution. Her suit displayed several warnings about airborne pathogens and environmental toxins. Dr. Vasquez laughed. "This? Oh, you'll get used to it. A little sweat never hurt anyone. Plus, it's great for the skin." Corral stared, baffled. Sweat? She checked her files and learned that sweating was a physiological mechanism humans had evolved to regulate body temperature. But from what she understood, it also meant they were constantly excreting water, one of the galaxy's most precious resources, right from their skin. And they seemed fine with it. As they moved further along the trail, Corral's assistant, Relmar, spoke up. "Chief, I'm detecting significant animal activity ahead," he whispered nervously. "One of the species, reptilian, cold-blooded, large teeth, and—" "Oh, don't worry about the alligators," Dr. Vasquez interrupted cheerfully. "They're usually pretty chill, just don't get too close." "Alligators," Corral echoed, immediately pulling up information on the species. Her files showed images of a creature with long jaws and sharp teeth that could easily crush through bone. And here was Dr. Vasquez, treating these alligators as though they were harmless. The trail opened up to a broad river where several humans were swimming. They laughed and splashed, paying no attention to the potential predators lurking in the waters. Corral felt her limbs stiffen as she watched one human drift perilously close to the bank, where one of these alligators lay in the sun, eyeing the swimmers with what seemed like idle curiosity. Is this safe?" she asked hesitantly. Dr. Vasquez chuckled, shrugging her shoulders. "As long as you don't bother them, they won't bother you. Besides, they've got way more interesting things to eat than us." She leaned closer, as if sharing a secret. Humans aren't exactly their favorite flavor. Corral was speechless. On her home planet, every living creature was meticulously managed, cataloged, and placed within secure environments to ensure safety. Yet here, these humans casually swam alongside apex predators, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Continuing their journey, the team reached a mountainous area with steep, rocky cliffs and harsh winds. At this point, Corral assumed the humans would finally need some of their advanced equipment, but instead, she was met with yet another shock. Young humans were climbing the cliff face, using nothing but ropes in their hands, laughing and calling to each other as they scaled the treacherous heights. A shrill alert went off in Corral's helmet as her suit detected a sudden drop in oxygen levels due to the altitude. She immediately engaged her respirator, her hands clutching her equipment tightly. Vasquez, noticing her distress, smiled again. "Altitude bothering you? We get used to it pretty quickly up here. Some folks even climb to the top just to enjoy the view." Corral couldn't comprehend it. Her suit was straining to adjust to the conditions that these humans seemed to thrive in, with nothing more than enthusiasm and muscle power. She watched, equal parts horrified and fascinated, as the climbers reached the summit, shouting and cheering, even setting up small tents as they prepared to camp in the high-altitude, low-oxygen environment overnight. "Dr. Vasquez," Corral began slowly, her voice tinged with bewilderment. How are humans able to endure this? The atmospheric pressure, the temperature variations, the physical strain?" Dr. Vasquez shrugged. "We adapt. Humans are kind of like cockroaches in that way," she said, laughing. "Throw us in almost any environment, and we'll figure out a way to survive." She paused, eyeing the aliens' reactions before adding, "Guess that's why they call us deathworlders, huh?" Corral couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and disbelief. In every recorded species database she had ever studied, survival came only at the cost of extreme caution, technology, and careful environmental management. Yet here were humans, embracing and even thriving in conditions that would send most species running. As they moved to another location, a beach dotted with small, colorful huts and teeming with yet more humans, Corral finally thought she'd seen everything. But then she noticed a group of humans sitting around a fire pit, casually cooking food over open flames. Relmar nudged her, his voice barely a whisper. "Chief, they're harnessing open fire, in an open environment." Corral felt her nerves spike. Fire was strictly regulated in her world. The risks were far too high, its power was too unpredictable. Yet here it was being treated like a mere cooking tool. She observed one human child giggling as they roasted what appeared to be a sweet, fluffy substance over the fire. "That's a s'more," Dr. Vasquez explained, catching their curious stares. "You roast the marshmallow, put it between chocolate and graham crackers. It's a camping tradition." "Camping?" Corral echoed, struggling to make sense of the concept. "Humans. Leave their safe habitats and choose to live outdoors? For recreation? Dr. Vasquez laughed. Yep, nothing like sleeping under the stars and breathing in the fresh air. Corral's mind raced. The concept was incomprehensible. Her own kind relied on airtight, temperature-controlled, safe habitats, avoiding nature's unpredictability at all costs. And here, humans embraced it willingly. But perhaps the most astonishing moment came when she overheard a human talking about an upcoming event called a polar plunge. As she understood it, humans would strip down and dive into near-freezing water, just for the thrill of it. Why would they do such a thing? Corral wondered aloud, as Dr. Vasquez merely shrugged and grinned. For fun, she replied. Humans have this thing. We like to test our limits. It's in our nature, I guess. The phrase struck Corral deeply, testing their limits. Every protocol, every piece of equipment, and every decision made on her homeworld was centered on staying as far from the limits of survival as possible. Yet humans seemed driven to confront those limits, pushing themselves to places where no rational being would ever willingly go. Corral could feel her worldview shifting, her understanding of what it meant to be alive morphing as she observed these humans laughing in the face of danger, seeing joy where others would see only risk. They were indeed deathworlders, but perhaps not because of Earth's hostile environment. It was because of their incredible, unrelenting, and inexplicable drive to survive, no, to thrive, in conditions that defied all sense. And in that moment she understood. Humans didn't survive in spite of their world. They survived because they embraced it. As Corral and her team continued their expedition across Earth, they arrived in a bustling urban center where humans flowed through streets filled with towering structures and flashing lights. The city was alive with noise, honking vehicles, street vendors, and the distant rumble of machinery. Corral adjusted her audio filters as the decibel levels triggered her suit's protective settings. But the humans around her seemed unfazed, chatting, laughing, and shouting over the cacophony as though this sensory overload were just part of their daily experience. A particularly loud siren blared as a human emergency vehicle rushed past, lights flashing. Corral flinched, instinctively activating her defensive posture, while her assistant Relmar looked around in panic. Chief, that sound. It's an alert, isn't it? Are we in immediate danger? Dr. Vasquez chuckled, noticing their reaction. Nah, that's just an ambulance. Somebody probably needs medical help. Happens all the time. She waved it off casually, but Corral couldn't help wondering how humans survived in an environment so filled with potential hazards that constant emergencies seemed normal. The group made their way to a local marketplace, where Dr. Vasquez introduced them to the concept of street food. Rows of stalls displayed an array of colorful dishes, each one more bewildering than the last. Corral's visor detected an overload of organic compounds, sugars, fats, spices, and proteins, in configurations she had never encountered before. Her suit flagged many of these foods as biologically hazardous or nutritionally excessive, and yet humans consumed them eagerly. Would you like to try a churro? Dr. Vasquez offered, holding out a fried stick coated in sugar. Corral hesitated, eyeing the treat. Her suit's analysis flagged it with a long list of warnings, including high sugar content and potential allergenic compounds. Is it safe? Dr. Vasquez laughed. Safe? Depends on your dentist. But delicious? Absolutely. She took a big bite, savoring the sweet flavor. Relmar leaned in and whispered, Chief, this substance would be considered a Class 2 biohazard on our home world. They're eating it as a treat? Corral watched, mesmerized, as humans around them consumed an array of fried, spicy, sugary, and caffeinated items. She noticed that many humans clutched cups of a dark, steaming liquid. The scent wafted over, triggering an alert on her suit's sensory module, flagging it as toxic at high doses. Corral's curiosity finally got the better of her. What is that drink everyone is consuming? Coffee, Dr. Vasquez replied, her eyes lighting up. Essentially, it's fuel for humans. We're practically dependent on it to function every morning. Corral scanned her files. Coffee contained caffeine, a stimulant that heightened human alertness and concentration, but it was also mildly addictive and could lead to health issues with excessive consumption. Yet here, Humans drank it casually, even ritually. It increases your heart rate, causes mild dependency, and can lead to health complications. And you drink it every day? Corral's voice carried a note of disbelief. Dr. Vasquez shrugged. Pretty much. Some people can't start their day without it. Besides, it's delicious. She held her cup up in a mock toast to caffeine, the real MVP. Corral glanced at her assistant, who was watching with the same astonished look she felt. They both knew that on their homeworld, the idea of regularly ingesting a stimulant, especially one that triggered stress responses, would be considered dangerously reckless. But here, it was practically a cultural cornerstone. As they continued through the market, Corral observed human interactions with one another. They shook hands, patted backs, even embraced. Physical contact was common, casual, and infused with a kind of warmth she found unfamiliar. Relmar whispered beside her, "Chief, they're bypassing personal space protocols. Isn't that dangerous? They could easily transmit diseases this way." Corral nodded, her visor showing a breakdown of potential contagion risks. Yet none of the humans seemed concerned. "Doctor." Vasquez noticed their hesitation and offered an explanation. "Humans are social creatures. Physical contact is a big part of how we connect and express ourselves. A handshake, a hug, it's how we say hello, how we comfort each other." The concept of tactile bonding was fascinating to Corral. On her planet, personal space was meticulously maintained, with individuals relying on verbal cues or slight nods to convey emotions. Yet here, the humans seemed to draw strength and comfort from close proximity, even in a world brimming with potential biological threats. Their next destination was an athletic event, a place humans referred to as a stadium. As they entered, the sheer size of the crowd overwhelmed Corral's sensory inputs. Thousands of humans packed together, cheering, chanting, and waving colorful banners. The noise was deafening, and her suit's sensors struggled to dampen the sound levels. "What are they doing?" Relmar asked, his voice filled with awe. "It's called a soccer match," Dr. Vasquez explained, barely audible over the roar of the crowd. "Two teams compete to get a ball into the opposing team's goal. It's a pretty big deal here." Corral observed the field as the players moved with astonishing speed and agility, seemingly unfazed by the exertion. Her suit calculated their heart rates, temperatures, and oxygen usage, and it became clear that they were pushing their bodies to extreme limits. She also noticed that the players frequently collided with one another, their bodies crashing together in a display of sheer physical force. "But they're injuring each other," Corral noted, watching as one player limped off the field clutching his leg. Dr. Vasquez shrugged. "Yeah, it happens. They'll be fine. A few stitches or a bandage, and they'll be back out there in no time." Relmar leaned toward Corral, whispering with disbelief, "They engage in physical combat for entertainment?" Corral could only nod, her mind racing. Not only were humans willingly putting themselves in situations with high injury potential, but they seemed to celebrate it. They laughed, cheered, and reveled in the competition. On her world, physical risks were minimized, and any form of bodily harm was met with immediate intervention. Yet here, it was embraced, even admired. The match ended with humans cheering wildly as the winning team celebrated. The energy in the stadium was almost palpable, a wave of exhilaration and joy that Corral could feel even through the protective barrier of her suit. Humans thrived on this intensity, feeding off the collective energy of their peers in a way that was entirely foreign to her species. Later, as the team prepared to return to their research facility, Corral found herself reflecting on the day's experiences. Every aspect of human life they had observed seemed to defy galactic norms. Whether it was their diet, social interactions, or recreational activities, everything about human culture seemed to hinge on a willingness to embrace or even seek out danger and challenge. As they boarded their transport, Corral's communicator buzzed with an incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. "Chief Researcher Corral, this is Director Wheeler. We're eagerly awaiting your initial observations. Can you summarize your findings on Earth's inhabitants thus far?" Corral paused, choosing her words carefully. "Director Wheeler, humans possess an unusual resilience. They thrive in conditions that would be deemed unsafe or irrational by our standards. They willingly expose themselves to hazards and seem to derive strength from it. The director's voice crackled through, a note of confusion evident. Do you mean they lack survival instincts? Corral considered this. No, Director, it's quite the opposite. They appear to have honed their instincts in a way that defies our understanding. They adapt, improvise, and embrace the unexpected. It's as if danger is woven into their very nature. She could hear the silence on the other end, the director no doubt grappling with the implications. Understood, Chief. We will expect a more detailed report. Proceed with caution. As the transmission ended, Dr. Vasquez, who had overheard parts of the conversation, leaned closer. So, what does the Council think of us? Corral gave a small, wry smile. They're adjusting their expectations, Dr. Vasquez laughed. Good, they'll need to if they're going to keep up with us. The humans around them continued their bustling activity, entirely unaware of the existential crisis they were causing among the alien researchers. Corral and her team watched as a group of young humans skateboarded down a flight of stairs, shouting in triumph as they defied gravity, and from the aliens' perspective, common sense. Corral couldn't help but feel an odd sense of admiration. Despite all logic, despite all protocols and safety measures ingrained in her own culture, these humans seemed to live by a different set of rules, rules that allowed them to adapt and thrive in ways she had never imagined. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, there was something valuable to learn from these deathworlders. The research team spent several more days on Earth, each experience presenting new layers of human behavior that defied explanation. Corral documented each observation meticulously, her reports growing in length and incredulity with each entry. But the true test of human adaptability and resilience came when an unexpected crisis unfolded, forcing Corral and her team to witness firsthand the sheer resourcefulness and recklessness of these deathworlders. It started innocuously enough. The research team had been granted access to a human laboratory conducting experiments on Earth's environmental adaptation methods. The lab, located on the outskirts of a large metropolitan area, was equipped with numerous advanced devices that monitored everything from air quality to microbial resilience. For Corral, it was an invaluable opportunity to observe human problem-solving in a controlled environment. But as they settled into the lab, Corral began to notice small anomalies. Her suit detected slight fluctuations in air pressure, and the temperature regulators in the lab seemed to be oscillating. The humans monitoring the equipment didn't appear concerned, even as the numbers drifted out of standard parameters. Dr. Vasquez, Corral began, gesturing to one of the monitors showing a significant increase in particulate matter. Is this fluctuation normal, Doctor? Vasquez squinted at the screen, then shrugged. That's probably just from the air filters, needing a bit of a clean. They get dusty sometimes. Corral felt a pang of anxiety. On her homeworld, equipment was maintained with rigid precision, and any deviation from normal readings would trigger an immediate shutdown. But Dr. Vasquez didn't seem worried, waving off the anomaly with a casual air that unsettled Corral. The situation took a sudden turn when an alarm blared through the lab. Corral's translator activated, interpreting the warning as critical system failure, temperature regulation breached. She turned to Dr. Vasquez, who frowned at the monitor, muttering under her breath. Is there a containment protocol in place? Corral asked, her voice taut with concern. Dr. Vasquez sighed. Well, normally yes, but our backup cooling systems are down for maintenance, so we might have to improvise a bit here. She walked briskly toward a wall panel and tapped a few buttons. Corral watched as the human scientists sprang into action, some of them scrambling to retrieve tools that looked, to her trained eye, disturbingly simple for such a critical failure. Improvise, Corral echoed, her voice barely containing her alarm. You're dealing with a critical system failure and you don't have immediate backup? Dr. Vasquez gave her a reassuring pat on the arm. Relax, we've got this. Sometimes things go wrong, and we just have to get creative. But Corral's instincts screamed otherwise. The temperature in the lab was rising, and even her suit's cooling system was beginning to strain under the conditions. Her assistant, Relmar, glanced nervously at her. "Chief, our suits weren't calibrated for these fluctuating conditions. We may need to evacuate." Coral nodded, her thoughts racing. Just as she turned to suggest that the team retreat to a safer location, one of the human technicians, a young man named Ethan, jogged over, holding a roll of what Coral recognized as duct tape. "All right, time to get to work," Ethan announced, grinning as he began wrapping the tape around a panel on the cooling unit. Coral stared, dumbfounded. "Is that adhesive tape?" "Duct tape," Dr. Vasquez corrected, chuckling. "It's a human classic. Fixes almost anything." Coral struggled to process the scene before her. Here they were, facing a potentially catastrophic system failure, and the humans were repairing vital equipment with what looked like an all-purpose adhesive. She glanced at Relmar, who looked equally horrified, his suit's sensors blinking red. "Chief, this is highly unconventional," he whispered, panic in his voice. Coral took a steadying breath. "Yes, but it appears it's their method." She watched as Ethan secured the duct tape with a satisfied nod, then gestured for one of his colleagues to activate the cooling system. With a hum, the temperature regulators resumed their operation, albeit shakily. The system's readings stabilized, though the monitors indicated it was functioning at barely half capacity. Dr. Vasquez grinned, clapping Ethan on the back. "See, good as new." Coral was speechless. Her mind whirled as she tried to reconcile the audacity of what she had just witnessed. Improvised repairs were strictly forbidden in her culture, where every system was double-checked and triple-tested. Yet here humans relied on instinct, creativity, and apparently adhesive tape to avert disaster. But the crisis was far from over. Moments after the initial cooling issue was addressed, another alarm sounded, a high-pitched, grating noise that sent a chill through Coral's core. The words on the monitor flashed, "Containment breach, hazardous substances detected." Dr. Vasquez's cheerful demeanor shifted, her expression growing serious as she surveyed the room. "All right, everyone, let's get those hazmat suits on. This might get a little rough." Relmar glanced at Coral, his voice barely a whisper. "Chief, a containment breach involving hazardous substances. Our suits aren't designed for this level of exposure. Should we request extraction?" Coral considered it, her fingers hovering over her communicator, but she hesitated, watching as the humans around her donned their protective suits with calm efficiency. There was no panic, only focus. She could feel the weight of their confidence, an assurance that somehow they would manage, even in the face of escalating danger. Dr. Vasquez caught Coral's gaze and gave her a reassuring nod. "It's going to be fine. Just stick with us and we'll keep you safe." A human technician handed Coral a makeshift mask, designed to filter out airborne particles. She hesitated, but the technician offered an encouraging smile. "It's not exactly what you're used to, but it does the job. Just follow our lead." As they moved toward the containment chamber, Coral felt a mix of fear and fascination. The humans exhibited a kind of calm resilience that she found almost unimaginable. They worked together seamlessly, communicating with gestures and brief words, their movements quick and practiced. Inside the chamber, a thin layer of a strange, iridescent substance coated the walls, shimmering under the emergency lights. Coral's sensors flagged it as a volatile compound, potentially hazardous to most biological forms. Dr. Vasquez adjusted her mask and examined the substance, her brow furrowing. "All right, we'll need to neutralize this before it spreads. Grab the containment foam," she instructed one of the technicians. As the humans set to work, Coral and Relmar stayed close, watching their every move. The humans operated with remarkable efficiency, applying the foam in precise bursts to neutralize the hazardous substance. But as they worked, another complication arose. The foam applicator jammed, its mechanism sputtering with a concerning hiss. "Great," Ethan muttered, shaking the device. "Always when you need it most." He glanced around, his gaze falling on a nearby container filled with common cleaning supplies. Coral's eyes widened as she realized what he intended to do. "Surely you're not suggesting using household chemicals to contain a hazardous substance?" Ethan grinned. "Why not? A little creativity never hurt anyone." He grabbed a bottle, reading the label, before he started mixing a makeshift solution. Relmar whispered in alarm, "Chief, this is beyond improvisation. It's reckless. But Corral couldn't deny the results. Ethan's concoction seemed to work, at least temporarily halting the spread of the substance. The humans quickly sealed off the area, stabilizing the chamber as best as they could. As the alarms finally ceased, Dr. Vasquez let out a sigh of relief. She removed her mask, wiping her brow, and shot Corral a grin. "See, sometimes you just have to work with what you've got." Corral was speechless. Her mind reeled from everything she had witnessed. Improvised repairs, makeshift containment measures, a reliance on ingenuity and instinct over rigid protocol. These humans had handled a series of crises that would have paralyzed her own team with analysis and caution. And as if to underline the lesson, Ethan handed Corral a small roll of duct tape, grinning. "Welcome to Earth's universal fix-it tool." Relmar, his voice laced with disbelief, muttered, "Chief, are they suggesting that we adopt their methods?" Corral glanced at the roll in her hand, feeling an odd surge of respect. These humans, with their unconventional methods, their creativity, their utter lack of adherence to standard protocols, they had managed to survive, even thrive, in conditions that would cripple most species. Dr. Vasquez noticed her expression and chuckled. "I know it seems crazy to you, but sometimes survival isn't about following every rule. It's about figuring things out as you go." Corral finally found her voice, her tone one of reluctant admiration. "On my world, such methods would be deemed reckless, yet you have proven effective. Perhaps there is value in flexibility." The humans exchanged knowing glances, smiling as though they had shared an unspoken understanding. For them, this was simply how things were done. But for Corral, it was a revelation. She looked around at the human scientists, their faces flushed with the thrill of success, their energy infectious. Despite all logic, despite every caution her training had drilled into her, she felt a strange kinship with them. They were deathworlders, yes, but not merely because of Earth's environment. It was their spirit, their adaptability, their refusal to let circumstance dictate their limits. As the team packed up, Dr. Vasquez clapped Corral on the back. "Next time, you might want to bring some duct tape of your own." Corral managed to smile, the first genuine one she'd felt in years. "Perhaps I will." In that moment, she realized that she had learned more from these humans than she ever could have anticipated. It wasn't their technology, their intelligence, or even their resilience that defined them. It was their unbreakable, unyielding will to survive, and perhaps even laugh in the face of the impossible. Back at their temporary quarters, Corral sat quietly, replaying the day's events in her mind. She had come to Earth expecting to observe a primitive species struggling against the harsh elements of their so-called death world. Instead, she had encountered beings who not only thrived, but seemed to find joy and purpose in the chaos. Corral's assistant, Relmar, entered the room, his expression mirroring her own confusion. He placed a small hollow tablet in front of her, a summary of their findings neatly organized into categories: human resilience, improvisational skills, tolerance for environmental extremes. "Chief," Relmar began slowly, his voice laced with doubt, "are we misinterpreting what it means to be advanced? On our world, advancement is marked by strict adherence to safety and control, by avoiding risks at all costs. But these humans, they seem to embrace danger. Could this be an evolution we do not yet understand?" Corral exhaled slowly, her thoughts jumbled. I am unsure, Relmar. Every instinct tells me their methods are reckless, yet they survive, even flourish, by facing the very conditions we avoid. They adapt, not by controlling their environment, but by becoming part of it." They sat in silence, each contemplating the implications. Earth had defied all expectations. What they had seen was not the fragile existence of beings clinging to survival on a hostile world. It was something deeper, a coexistence with unpredictability, a resilience born from accepting chaos as a constant companion. Their reflections were interrupted by a transmission from the Galactic Council. The face of Director Vler filled the screen. Her eyes narrowed with curiosity. "Chief Researcher Corral, your report is unsettling. I need to understand. Are humans truly thriving under these conditions, or are they simply ignoring the dangers?" Corral hesitated, formulating her response. Director, it is not a matter of ignoring dangers. Humans are aware, fully cognizant of the risks, yet they engage with them willingly. They do not shield themselves from their world. Rather, they face it head-on, adapting continuously. I have witnessed them use minimal resources, items as simple as duct tape, to overcome life-threatening crises. Director Wheeler's expression turned skeptical. So you believe their survival is due to this duct tape? Corral chose her words carefully. It is not the material itself, Director, but what it represents. Duct tape is a symbol of human ingenuity, their ability to find solutions in even the most basic tools, to improvise and adapt with whatever they have. In my assessment, this mindset may be the reason they have endured on such a perilous planet. The director's expression softened, curiosity replacing skepticism. So you're suggesting that we study this mindset, this embrace of chaos? Perhaps it would be beneficial, Corral replied, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. We have spent eons perfecting control, eliminating unpredictability from our lives. But Earth's inhabitants have evolved by welcoming it, by allowing themselves to change with their environment rather than bend it to their will. The transmission ended, leaving Corral and Relmar once again in contemplative silence. For the first time in her career, Corral felt the boundaries of her understanding stretching, fraying at the edges as new possibilities unfolded. The next day, she found herself drawn to the human's workspace. Dr. Vasquez was there, laughing with her colleagues as they ran through data on the latest crisis they had narrowly averted. Corral watched, a strange mixture of admiration and discomfort swirling within her. The laughter, the camaraderie, the sheer ease with which they discussed what she considered life-threatening incidents, it was bewildering. Noticing Corral's presence, Dr. Vasquez waved her over. "Hey, Q, you look like you've seen a ghost." Corral tilted her head, running the phrase through her translator. "A ghost? Do you believe in spectral beings on Earth?" Dr. Vasquez laughed. "Not exactly. It's just a way of saying you look, well, shaken up. Is everything all right?" Corral hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Dr. Vasquez, I have observed that your species thrives under conditions most would find intolerable. You confront dangers with a casualness that defies logic. How do you find peace in such chaos?" Vasquez considered this, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "Honestly, I don't think we do. I think we just accept that life is messy, unpredictable. We've learned to make the best of it. When things go wrong, we figure out a way forward. It's not about peace, it's about resilience, I guess." "Resilience," Corral repeated, testing the word on her tongue. Dr. Vasquez nodded. "Yeah, I mean, look at our history. Humanity has been through plagues, wars, natural disasters. Every time we've had to adapt, to rebuild. We've had no choice but to embrace the chaos because that's how life on Earth is. We don't get to choose our challenges. We just choose how we respond to them." Corral felt a strange warmth, something she had never experienced before, as Dr. Vasquez's words settled within her. Humans didn't survive because they were fearless. They survived because they had learned to live with their fears, to carry on in spite of them. Perhaps there was a lesson in that for her own species. As the day went on, Corral couldn't shake the feeling that her understanding of existence had fundamentally shifted. She felt both awe and a profound discomfort, realizing that everything she had been taught was built on a foundation of control. Yet here was a species that had thrived by letting go, by embracing the unknown. Later that evening, she joined a human group gathered around a campfire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. She sat quietly, listening as they shared stories of past adventures, each tale more absurd than the last. Near-death experiences on mountain expeditions, encounters with wild animals, risky scientific endeavors gone wrong, but somehow salvaged. One story, told by a human named Carlos, left her particularly shaken. He recounted a harrowing experience climbing a steep cliff when his equipment failed. Hanging by a thread, he had somehow managed to pull himself up using sheer willpower and improvisation. "And when I got to the top," Carlos said, chuckling, "I realized I'd forgotten my water. I spent the whole climb parched as a desert, thinking I was about to die. But hey, I made it, right? The humans around him laughed, but Corral felt a pang of horror. You willingly put yourself in such a dangerous position, without adequate preparation? Carlos shrugged, grinning. Yeah, but it was worth it. The view from the top was unbelievable. Sometimes, you have to take a risk to experience something extraordinary. Corral was silent, her mind racing. Risk for the sake of experience. It was a concept she struggled to grasp. On her world, risk was calculated, minimized, eliminated if possible. Yet these humans seemed to seek it out, finding value in the thrill, in the challenge itself. Dr. Vasquez leaned toward her, smiling softly. You look like you're having an existential crisis, Q. Corral managed a faint smile. Perhaps I am. I have spent my life seeking control, avoiding risks, as our protocols dictate. Yet here I see a species that seems to thrive precisely because they embrace these dangers. Dr. Vasquez nodded thoughtfully. Maybe it's not about being in control all the time. Maybe it's about trusting yourself to handle whatever comes, knowing you'll figure it out, one way or another. Corral's gaze drifted to the stars above, her mind filled with questions she had never dared ask before. Could her own species benefit from such a mindset? Was there a strength in adaptability, in trusting oneself to survive even without total control? And if so, had they been limiting themselves all along? In that moment, she felt a kinship with these humans, a shared understanding that perhaps life was not meant to be neatly contained. Perhaps there was beauty in the uncertainty, in the messiness of existence. As the fire crackled and the humans laughed around her, Corral felt a strange, thrilling sensation rising within her. She realized with a touch of fear and excitement that the humans had not merely shown her another way to live. They had challenged her entire worldview, forcing her to question everything she had ever believed about safety, survival, and what it meant to truly live. For the first time, Corral considered that perhaps, just perhaps, her own people could learn from these deathworlders. Perhaps they could find a new kind of strength, not in their systems or protocols, but in themselves. And as she watched the fire dance, she understood one thing with a clarity that filled her with both awe and a touch of terror. To live like a human was to accept life as it came, in all its chaotic, unpredictable beauty. To be human was, in its own way, an act of courage. The following day, Corral's research team joined Dr. Vasquez and a select group of human engineers at a remote energy facility on the outskirts of the city. The Galactic Council had requested data on Earth's energy production methods, and the humans had arranged a tour to showcase their various systems, including an experimental nuclear reactor. As they entered the facility, Corral couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. While her own civilization had long mastered sustainable energy sources, Earth's methods seemed perilously unstable. She had read reports of meltdowns and radiation leaks, phenomena so dangerous that the Galactic Council considered nuclear power to be an unacceptable risk. But here, humans managed reactors with seemingly casual confidence. Dr. Vasquez led the way, briefing them on the facility's operations. This reactor supplies power to several surrounding areas, including emergency grids. We've had a few incidents in the past, but nothing we couldn't handle, she said, her tone light. Corral's mind spun with questions. Incidents? As in system failures? Dr. Vasquez nodded nonchalantly. Once in a while, but we're used to it. We have procedures in place to contain any issues. The human engineers around them chuckled, exchanging knowing glances. One of them, a tall man named Alec, piped up, "Yeah, we call it reactor wrangling. You'd be surprised what a few quick fixes can do." Corral's suit immediately flagged this statement as high risk, flashing several alerts across her visor. But before she could voice her concern, an alarm blared, filling the room with a harsh metallic sound. Her translator interpreted it as core temperature escalation, immediate action required. The facility staff sprang into motion, but Corral could sense a palpable shift in the room. The human engineers didn't panic. They moved with purpose, each one taking on a specific task. Dr. Vasquez remained calm, her focus intense as she issued orders to her team. "We've got a coolant system malfunction," Alex said, examining a control panel. "We need to manually adjust the core temperature before it reaches critical levels." Coral felt a surge of adrenaline as she observed the monitors. The core's temperature was rising alarmingly fast. "This is a level 7 emergency on most galactic scales," she exclaimed. "We must evacuate and call for immediate containment." Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "We don't have time for that. The nearest evacuation point is too far. We either fix this here and now, or the whole facility could go down." Coral's assistant, Relmar, looked at her, his face pale. "Chief, we should not be here. Our protocols dictate immediate withdrawal in such conditions." Coral knew he was right. Her instincts, her training, everything within her screamed to flee. But as she looked around, watching the humans work with steady hands and calm expressions, she felt an unexpected impulse to stay. Dr. Vasquez noticed her hesitation. "Trust us, Q. We've done this before." Against every survival instinct she possessed, Coral nodded, steeling herself as she prepared to help. The humans had shown her a new way of facing danger, one that defied logic yet somehow felt right. She was here to learn, and if this was part of understanding human resilience, then she would stay. Alec quickly handed her a pair of thermal gloves. "You're going to need these. We're going to reset the manual coolant valve, but it'll require some unconventional techniques." Coral accepted the gloves, her mind reeling. "Unconventional? What does that entail?" Alec grinned, adjusting his own gloves. "We're going to use some elbow grease and duct tape." Coral felt a strange sense of déjà vu. She glanced down at the roll of duct tape, her skepticism colliding with an odd sense of faith. These humans had used this material in almost every emergency she had witnessed so far. If they believed it could hold back a reactor crisis, perhaps it could. The team moved quickly to the coolant chamber, where hot steam hissed from a ruptured valve. Alec approached the valve, shielding his face as he signaled for the others to hold it steady. Coral and Relmar helped position the machinery, their suits detecting dangerous levels of radiation. "All right, we're going to patch this up the old-fashioned way," Alec said, tearing a strip of duct tape. "This should hold until we can get the backup coolant system online." Relmar looked horrified, whispering to Coral, "Chief, this is madness. We are patching a reactor with adhesive." Coral forced herself to focus, ignoring her assistant's objections. She could feel her heart pounding as Alec pressed the tape into place, sealing the ruptured area with quick, practiced movements. The duct tape seemed woefully inadequate, yet as the steam slowed, she realized it was working, at least temporarily. Dr. Vasquez checked her monitor, her face lit up with relief. "Temperature's stabilizing. Good work, everyone." Just as they began to breathe a collective sigh of relief, another alarm blared. The monitor flashed with the words, "Structural instability detected. Evacuate immediately." The ground trembled, and a deep rumbling echoed from below. "An aftershock," Dr. Vasquez muttered, her voice tense. "We need to get out, now." The team sprinted through the facility, the walls shuddering as the tremors intensified. Coral struggled to keep her balance, her mind racing as she followed the humans through a labyrinth of corridors. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, every instinct screaming to retreat. But the humans pressed forward, their faces focused, their movements controlled. Alec led them to a reinforced stairwell, gesturing for everyone to descend. The air was thick with tension, the building groaning under the strain as they raced downward. As they reached the lower levels, Dr. Vasquez stopped, examining a junction where a pipe had burst, spewing coolant fluid across the floor. She grabbed a nearby wrench, tightening the valve with quick, precise motions. "Isn't this dangerous?" Coral asked, her voice strained. "Should we not prioritize evacuation?" Dr. Vasquez shook her head, determination in her eyes. "We have to make sure the coolant flow remains steady, or the reactor could go critical. Every second counts." Coral felt a strange, conflicting surge of emotions. She had always believed that survival was paramount, that any risk must be mitigated or avoided. But here was Dr. Vasquez, risking her life to ensure the safety of others. For humans, survival was not a solitary endeavor. It was a collective responsibility, a duty to each other. Finally, the tremors subsided, and they made their way to the exit, emerging into the open air just as emergency vehicles arrived on the scene. The humans around her let out sighs of relief, some of them embracing, others clapping each other on the back. Kral stood among them, her heart racing, her mind overwhelmed by everything she had witnessed. Humans had faced the crisis with courage and calm, improvising in ways that defied every protocol she knew. They hadn't hesitated, hadn't paused to analyze or calculate. They had simply acted, trusting in their instincts and in each other. Dr. Vasquez approached her, a grin on her face. "Not bad for a deathworlder, huh?" Kral managed a faint smile, feeling an odd sense of pride. "Your methods are unconventional, but they are undeniably effective." Dr. Vasquez laughed, slapping Kral on the shoulder. "That's the spirit. Now you're starting to think like one of us." As they stood in the aftermath of the crisis, Kral felt a profound shift within herself. She had come to Earth expecting to study humans, to understand their resilience in the face of danger. But now, she realized that they had taught her something far more valuable. For humans, survival was not a calculated exercise. It was a leap of faith, a willingness to trust in oneself and in others. They embraced the uncertainty, the unpredictability of life, and found strength in their unity, in their courage to face the unknown. As she looked around, Kral understood that she would leave Earth forever changed. She had witnessed a different kind of strength, one that defied logic yet resonated with a truth she couldn't deny. These deathworlders had taught her that perhaps the greatest power lay not in control, but in the courage to face life as it was, chaotic, unpredictable, and beautifully resilient. As they prepared to depart, Alec handed her one final roll of duct tape, grinning. "For when things get tough out there, Chief, just remember, there's always a solution if you're willing to improvise." Kral accepted it, a smile playing at her lips. She would carry this simple gift as a reminder of everything she had learned from these remarkable beings. And as the ship lifted off, she looked down at the planet below, feeling a newfound respect and admiration for the species who called it home. As the ship climbed through Earth's atmosphere, Kral sat in quiet contemplation, the roll of duct tape resting in her hands. She felt its weight, absurdly disproportionate to its physical mass, as though the small cylinder encapsulated everything she had learned about the humans. In the simple, unremarkable tape lay a symbol of human resilience, adaptability, and their indomitable spirit. Her assistant, Relmar, broke the silence, his tone soft with a reverence she hadn't heard from him before. "Chief, these humans, they live on a knife's edge, balancing between chaos and control. It is unlike anything we've ever seen." Kral nodded, her gaze distant. "Yes, Relmar. They face their world not by overpowering it with technology or control, but by flowing with its unpredictability. They find solutions in simplicity, in everyday materials, in ways we would never have considered." He glanced at the roll of duct tape in her hands, his curiosity piqued. "Do you believe we could learn from them, Chief? Could our people ever adopt this mindset?" Kral exhaled, feeling the magnitude of his question settle over her. "I believe we must try. We have shielded ourselves from risk, controlled every aspect of our lives to eliminate uncertainty. But perhaps in doing so, we have lost something vital, the ability to adapt, to grow in the face of adversity." Relmar nodded slowly, his own beliefs seemingly shaken. For their entire lives, they had known only one path, the path of control, of calculated survival. Yet now, after witnessing the humans' resilience, their courage in the face of danger, the flaws in that path had become glaringly apparent. As they drifted into space, Kral's communicator beeped, signaling an incoming message from the Galactic Council. Director Villar's face appeared on the screen, her expression one of anticipation mixed with concern. "Chief Researcher Kral, your report on Earth's inhabitants has been provocative," she began, her tone carefully measured. "The Council has reviewed your initial findings, and there are those who question the necessity of this study. They believe humans are simply a reckless species, an anomaly in the universe." Kral felt a surge of determination. She had witnessed something extraordinary, something that defied easy explanations or dismissals. The humans were not simply reckless, they were brave, adaptable, and relentless in their pursuit of survival and meaning. "Director, with all due respect, I must disagree, Corral replied, her voice steady. The humans are not reckless. They understand the risks, yet they embrace them. They have an intrinsic resilience that allows them to face their world's dangers head-on, finding strength and simplicity in adaptability. It is a resilience that we, as a species, could learn from. Director Wheeler's brows furrowed, her skepticism apparent. So you're suggesting that we abandon centuries of carefully developed safety protocols, that we embrace chaos as they do? Corral shook her head. Not abandon, Director, balance. We can maintain our protocols, our safeguards, but we must also be willing to adapt, to face challenges without the absolute certainty we have grown accustomed to. We must allow room for flexibility. Director Wheeler was silent, her gaze assessing. Finally, she inclined her head. Very well, Chief. Your insights will be taken into consideration, but know that you are suggesting a profound shift in our worldview. Many will resist it. Corral nodded, her resolve unshaken. I understand, but if we are to survive in this universe, if we are to grow, we must be willing to change. The transmission ended, leaving Corral with a strange sense of peace. For so long, she had believed in the absolute necessity of control, of maintaining a perfect order. But now, after her experiences with the humans, she understood that survival was not about rigidly adhering to plans. It was about facing the unknown with courage and creativity. She looked at Relmar, a faint smile tugging at her lips. We have much to share when we return. Relmar's eyes lit up with a newfound enthusiasm. Perhaps we can introduce them to duct tape? Corral laughed, a genuine, unrestrained sound that felt almost foreign to her. It was a laugh born not from humor alone, but from a profound sense of connection, of understanding. For the first time, she felt a kinship with another species, a bond that transcended biology and culture. As the ship entered warp speed, Corral leaned back, her mind drifting to the moments she had shared with the humans. She thought of Dr. Vasquez's casual courage, Alec's fearless improvisation, and Carlos's story of risking everything for the view from the mountaintop. These humans had taught her that life was not about perfect safety. It was about daring to experience, to risk, to live fully. In the quiet of the ship's cabin, Corral addressed the Council in her final report. Earth's inhabitants have shown me a truth I had forgotten, a truth that lies at the core of existence itself. Survival is not about avoiding risk, but about embracing it, about trusting in oneself and in those around you. The humans embody this truth with a resilience that defies logic and reason. They thrive not despite the chaos, but because of it. Her report concluded, she felt a sense of completion, as though a door had closed on one chapter of her life, opening onto a new horizon. She had come to Earth as an observer, a researcher, tasked with analyzing a strange species. But she was leaving as a student, as someone forever changed by the lessons of humanity. As the ship sped toward her home planet, Corral allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She understood now that her journey had not been about studying another species. It had been about discovering her own capacity for growth, for change. And perhaps as she introduced the Galactic Council to the concept of resilience, of adaptability, she would also help her own people find their path to a deeper, richer existence. When they finally docked on her homeworld, Corral stepped off the ship, the roll of duct tape still in her hands. Her colleagues looked at her curiously, some with open skepticism, others with a touch of awe. She felt no need to explain. The roll of tape was a symbol, a reminder of everything she had learned on Earth. As she walked through the halls of the research facility, she knew that the journey was only beginning. She would face resistance, doubt, perhaps even ridicule from those who clung to the old ways. But she was ready, armed with the lessons of humanity, a species that had taught her the true meaning of survival. And deep within, she felt a quiet strength, a resilience that she had not known before. It was as though a piece of Earth, of its people, had settled within her, a spark of courage that would guide her through the uncertainties ahead. Corral glanced down at the duct tape, smiling softly. She understood now that it wasn't just an object. It was a philosophy, a reminder that there was always a way forward, no matter how improbable. And as she faced the future, she knew that she would carry this lesson with her, a piece of Earth's spirit woven into her own. Months had passed since Coral's journey to Earth, but the experience remained vivid in her mind. The research facility's quiet halls felt strange after the noise, the laughter, and the boundless energy she had encountered among the humans. Her report to the Galactic Council had stirred debate across her homeworld, challenging deeply held beliefs about control, safety, and adaptability. Sitting in her office, Coral reviewed the recent council directives. To her surprise, the council had tentatively approved a new set of experimental protocols inspired by her findings. These adaptability initiatives, as they were called, encouraged controlled improvisation in situations where rigid procedures had traditionally reigned. It was a small step, but one that hinted at a broader shift in thinking. As she scanned the document, a quiet alert sounded, signaling an incoming message from Earth. Her face softened as Dr. Vasquez's image appeared on her screen, grinning widely. "Coral, how's life back among the neat and orderly?" Dr. Vasquez teased, laughter in her eyes. Coral smiled, feeling a familiar warmth. "Orderly, yes, but there have been changes." She held up the roll of duct tape Dr. Vasquez had given her, now a permanent fixture on her desk. "It seems your gift has sparked some new ideas here." Dr. Vasquez laughed. "I told you duct tape fixes everything." Coral chuckled, the sound a little less restrained than it once had been. "I suppose it does. The Council has even approved minor adaptability protocols. They've agreed that flexibility may be beneficial." Dr. Vasquez raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Look at you, spreading the human way. Before you know it, your people will be climbing mountains and duct-taping reactors like pros." Coral smiled, the comment striking a deeper chord than Dr. Vasquez knew. "Perhaps not quite yet, but they are beginning to understand that survival is not merely about control." These adaptability initiatives, as they were called, encouraged controlled improvisation in situations where rigid procedures had traditionally reigned. It was a small step, but one that hinted at a broader shift in thinking. As she scanned the document, a quiet alert sounded, signaling an incoming message from Earth. Her face softened as Dr. Vasquez's image appeared on her screen, grinning widely. "Coral, how's life back among the neat and orderly?" Dr. Vasquez teased, laughter in her eyes. Coral smiled, feeling a familiar warmth. "Orderly, yes, but there have been changes." She held up the roll of duct tape Dr. Vasquez had given her, now a permanent fixture on her desk. "It seems your gift has sparked some new ideas here." Dr. Vasquez laughed. "I told you duct tape fixes everything." Coral chuckled, the sound a little less restrained than it once had been. "I suppose it does. The Council has even approved minor adaptability protocols. They've agreed that flexibility may be beneficial." Dr. Vasquez raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Look at you, spreading the human way. Before you know it, your people will be climbing mountains and duct-taping reactors like pros." Coral smiled, the comment striking a deeper chord than Dr. Vasquez knew. "Perhaps not quite yet, but they are beginning to understand that survival is not merely about control." The room buzzed with a mix of skepticism and curiosity, but she could see that her words had struck a chord. As she concluded her speech, she held up the roll of duct tape, smiling softly. "Sometimes, survival doesn't come from following every rule. Sometimes it comes from being willing to fix what's broken with whatever you have, to find strength in simplicity, in creativity. The humans taught me this. And perhaps we too can learn to thrive, not despite our challenges, but because of them." The council members exchanged glances, some nodding thoughtfully, others murmuring among themselves. Coral knew the change would not come overnight, but she had planted a seed, a spark of the resilience she had learned from Earth. As she left the chamber, she felt an unfamiliar yet comforting sensation: hope. She knew the path ahead would be long and uncertain, but she was ready. Earth had taught her that sometimes the greatest discoveries were not found in the stars, but within oneself. And as she walked through the quiet halls of her world, the roll of duct tape tucked under her arm, Coral knew she would carry that spark of human resilience with her always, a small piece of Earth, guiding her through the unknown.